My name's Adam Pratt, and I am the founder of Chaos to Memories. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we do. But one of the things that I get to do as the owner of the company is I speak and present a lot. I speak at uh, conferences and libraries and genealogical societies, and we can also do it online and reach people around the world. We love the work that we do at Chaos to Memories, and I love sharing our best practices. And I've been looking forward to this session. We had a great turnout a couple weeks ago for our studio tour. We've been planning for this just to connect and share what we've been working on and learning. And the title, Declutter Your Photo Life, actually comes from a book. Some folks in the chat pod mentioned it, but it comes from a book that I wrote almost 2 years ago now of the same title. And what's interesting about the concept of declutter your photo life is as you think about that topic, there are different things that come to mind. So this title slide has a bunch of photographic slides on it. When you think about decluttering your photo life, maybe that's what you think of. Some of you will think about prints and negatives and albums and scrapbooks. And then others of you are thinking about digital photographs. You're thinking about memory cards and thumb drives and hard drives and computers and so on. The good news is that the topic of today's session, Declutter Your Photo Life, it will be relevant to all of those formats. So whether you're thinking of analog printed photos, negatives, slides, digital photos, or even home movies, the process that we use at Chaos to Memories that I'm going to walk you through tonight is really the same. It's just a high-level overview, and I think this will be really helpful. The book is called Declutter Your Photo Life. At the end, I'm going to give you a special discount code to get 40% off the book. And if you miss that, we'll also send a follow-up email tomorrow with some useful links and so on. But Declutter Your Photo Life has it's actually my 8th book. It's my favorite book. And it comes out of a passion for the work that we do at Chaos to Memories. And the book basically has a 5-step outline. There's more to it than that, but it's a 5-step outline. It's the workflow and the process that we use every single day in our studio. And I see a lot of people with good intentions go down this road, they start organizing and so on, and they get frustrated, they run out of steam, they run into dead ends. And so the intention of the book was to save people some of that wasted time and learn from the best practices that we've established at Chaos to Memories. So that's where the concept comes from. You can learn more in the book if you're interested. And I've got a few other resources I'll share at the end. But it's kind of funny that I'm actually wearing the same shirt today that I did in that photo. But this is where I work every day. This is the Chaos to Memory studio. We're in Wheaton, Illinois, out in the suburbs of Chicago. I'm not the only Chaos to Memory staff member online today. I also have Gretchen. Gretchen is our studio lead, and she's been with us for a couple years, I think about 3 years. Gretchen's an amazing part of the team, and she's in the chat pod, and she's going to do her best to answer questions and help along the way. So at Chaos to Memories, we take stuff like this. This is a real photo of a real client project. And this is not even the biggest one. This is very typical, but photos, albums, scrapbooks, home movies, film reels, videotapes, curled things, old things, damaged things. And then we scan and organize and make them searchable and deliver projects back like this. And this is a good moment for me to pause and mention that most of the clients that we work with are families. And so most of our work is focused on preserving family photo archives. However, we do work with some nonprofits. We've done some works for colleges and universities. And as I looked down the registration list, I did notice that we had a lot of guests coming from kind of the professional archival space, so working in museums and libraries and so on. And so I just wanted to mention that one, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I think you'll get a lot out of kind of the workflow that we use. But I also wanted to acknowledge when you're in a museum and you're dealing maybe with donors and you're dealing with material that comes from a lot of different sources over a long period of time, some of the processes we are going to kind of walk through tonight may be a little oversimplified. Sometimes you'll have some more complicated situations. It's very, very relevant for family photo archives, and I think there's still a lot to learn from the session. So I'm glad you're here, and I'm looking forward to diving in. So everything that I'm going to talk about and everything that we do kind of falls into three main categories. So we've got physical photos, and we see these every day. And this could be, again, prints, slides, negatives, albums, scrapbooks, documents, tiny things, oversized things, all sorts of physical photos. Then the second main category of the material we see is digital photos and videos. And this is coming from phones and cameras, computers, clouds, memory cards, CDs, and so on. And then the third main category is home movies. And these come in videotapes, film reels, discs, DVDs, and so on. As you came to this session, you probably had something in mind, some kind of format, something that is burdening you. And the interesting thing is the number one word that people use to describe their photos to us is overwhelmed, which actually makes me sad because that's not why we took them, right? We took them to capture memories, to tell stories, to remember things and people and places and events. And yet most of us, because of the volume and because of how personal these memories are, most of us feel overwhelmed. So the good news is, regardless of what you have, regardless of what category you are in, and maybe you're in on 2 or 3 of these categories, regardless of the material that you're dealing with and that you want to preserve and organize, the workflow I'm about to teach you covers all of these. So at a high level, it's really all the same, okay? So let's take a look and think from the family perspective why we capture these photos and why we want to declutter and organize. So these happen to be just a few photos of me many years ago, just some old family photos. And there is a story behind each one of these. So what's interesting is so much of the work that we do at Chaos to Memories is very technical, right? Tons of computers and technology and gadgets and hard drives and backups. And we're trying to, just do really high quality work, do it efficiently, and all of these things. So there's a lot of technology and efficiency. And yet, that is not the end goal. The end goal is to preserve these stories, capture them, and share these stories behind all of these photos. So as much as we deal with technology, we also deal a lot with people, and that's super important to us. And it keeps us going. It's the motivation for the work that we do. And the reason we want to share these stories, I think there's really 2 reasons. We want to remember and be remembered, right? So that's kind of how I encapsulate all the work that we do. We want to remember events. We want to remember people. Sometimes we are remembering people that are no longer with us. And we also want to be remembered. There is something self-focused normally in this work. We want to be remembered. We want to, people to remember us, that we lived, that we existed, that we had an impact. And so the ability to share this today and with future generations is really, really important. So this is a big project, whether you're doing it yourself or for other people or doing it in an archive, you know that it's a big project. And so having the goal in mind, the end goal, I think is key. So we have 4 goals. They all start with S. They are, number 1, it's sorted. So our primary sorting and organization method is by date. Again, if you work in an archive and you have different collections and different record groups that may have some complication, I totally understand that. But when it comes to family photo archives, our goal is to sort everything as well as possible chronologically. Then we also want to make that archive searchable. So we do this with industry standard embedded metadata. Some of you think that just sounded like a bunch of technical gobbledygook, but hang on. Basically, having it sorted is nice, but having it searchable is even better. And the crazy thing is our world is full of technology and search, right? We search for movies and TV shows and clothes and books and airline tickets and like everything in our life. And yet for most of us, some of our most important memories, our family photos, we have a hard time finding them. And so when our kids graduate or get married or, our loved ones retire or whatever it is, the ability to find those photos is elusive. It's frustrating. So the ability to have them sorted, but also searchable is key. And then things flow from that because when photos are searchable, they're also shareable. So whether I am going to find my favorite photos and print them, or put them in a slideshow, or put them in a photo book, or just post them on Facebook, when it's my sister's birthday and I want to share a funny old photo, whatever it is, search leads to the ability to share. And then when all of this is done, you also have them secure because what we find literally with every single client, there's no exception to this. People's photos are in a lot of different places. If we think about physical photos, they're on the fridge, in a box, on a shelf, in the basement, like, just all over the place. And it's even more true of digital. They're in the cloud, on a computer, on an old computer, on 5 backup drives, on a stack of CDs. When you have something distributed across a bunch of different places, it's impossible to keep that safe and backed up, right? So the ability to get this scanned, sorted, searchable all in one place then means that I can back it up and keep it safe. And so the ability to have all of these memories searchable, shareable, secure is a huge relief. So that's what we do for every client. And we keep this goal in mind because these projects can be big. Sometimes if you're doing it yourself, it can feel a little overwhelming, and you got to keep that goal in mind so you keep going, pushing through the work to get to the end because it's a great payoff. So let's look at the 5-step overview. So the 5-step workflow that we use for every project, with no exception, is these 5 steps. And this is the main outline of the book: gather, preserve, organize, share, and maintain. So we kind of have some jokes in the studio. We've got about 10 people on staff here at Chaos to Memories. And one of the things that Gretchen, who's on the call, and the other staff members, they always tell new staff members, we're pretty excited. We have somebody new joining next month, but we always tell the new staff members, there are no shortcuts, right? There's no magic to this, and there are no shortcuts. And what we mean by that is it's important to do these steps in order, because if you don't, at a minimum, your process is not going to be as efficient as possible. Worst case scenario, you're going to get frustrated and you're going to give up and you're not going to finish your project because it is a lot of work. So we believe in this process. Again, it's the outline of the book. Most of today's session is going to focus on gathering because that's where we have to start. I will hit on all 5. And we have resources. If you want to learn more about these in detail, I will cover some of those resources at the end, but we'll go through each 5 of these, and let's start with gather. So if you came to this session thinking about your physical family photos, then you're going to be wanting to gather as much together as possible all in one place. And so your most common formats are going to be prints, like you see on the left. That's an old photo of me and my grandmother on a train in West Virginia, way, way back. The image in the middle is a photographic slide. It's a Kodachrome slide. And on the right, you've got a little 3-strip of 35mm negatives. So these are the 3 most common formats we see in the studio: prints, slides, negatives. However, there are other formats. So we also see a lot of photo albums like this. This is a little slip-in. Sometimes we see very modern, nice archival photo albums, but those are pretty rare. What we also see a lot of is the adhesive sticky albums, which we're not really fond of, but I know we all did them back in the 70s and 80s. So we see a lot of albums. We also see a lot of scrapbooks. So these tend to be black paper scrapbook from like the 19-teens, 1920s, all the way up through the 1940s, kind of the World War II era. And these tended to be either stuck in with glue or tape, or the little photo corners like you see here. And one of the cool things about these is that they tended, as you can see this example, they tended to have a lot of handwritten notes. So we get a lot of clues from these that we don't always get from more modern prints. So this is another common format we see, as well as some uncommon formats. So on the left, we have a carte de visite from the 1800s. We have a medium format negative in the middle. Top right, we have a stereo realist slide. So this is like the original 3D. And then bottom right, we have a Viewmaster reel that actually uses personal photographs. Most of these are like commercial and Disney toys, if you will, but people also shot these with special cameras and made personal reels of them as well. I point out these uncommon formats because I want to call out that if you see things in your collection that you're not familiar with, maybe you don't have the equipment or the knowledge or the patience for that matter to scan a slide, don't give up on it. Don't throw it away. Don't get rid of it. There could be incredible memories there. But if you come across uncommon things, hold on to them until maybe you can get some expert help to digitize or repair that thing, because there may be more there than meets the eye. Next thing I want to talk about is some common mistakes. So those are common and uncommon formats. At our studio, we work with hundreds of clients every year. Again, mostly families, some organizations, colleges, but we do see some common mistakes. And the thing that I would say about the mistakes is that they're all well-intentioned, right? People want to simplify, they want to streamline. And so one of the common mistakes we see, especially from families, is they discard the negatives. They have the prints and the negatives, and we have people with some frequency come to us and say, you know, those pesky negatives that aren't any good, there's no use to them. Well, I threw them away. They say that proudly. I kind of cringe inside, and I think that's sad. If that's you, you know, it's okay. We're going to move on. If all you have is the prints, then we'll scan the prints, right? But if you do have the negatives and you still have those in your possession, I would encourage you to keep them. They are generally, they age better. They take up 1/10 the space. They take up 1/10 the weight of a corresponding print, and we can get a higher resolution, better color, better quality, more complete scan from a negative in almost every case than we can from a print. So if you still got the negs, keep them. And then another common mistake we see is separating them. So our suggestion is keep the prints and negatives together, because if you separate them and you find a great print that you want to scan, but it's torn, damaged, faded, yellow, whatever, it's going to be pretty tricky to find that missing negative if it's just dumped in a box or separated by the handfuls. So if they're together, at least for now, keep them together. That would be our suggestion. Another common mistake is discarding some of the envelopes, kind of the ephemera that come with the photographs. Now, a lot of people are tackling these projects. They're trying to declutter and simplify their photos, specifically because they're overwhelmed. And so they think the more I can get rid of, maybe I'm downsizing, maybe I'm moving into a senior home, I'm moving my parents, I'm moving my parents out of the house, whatever it is, you want to get rid of stuff. And I get that. However, for now, I would say don't discard the envelopes. The receipts, the coupons, keep all of that stuff because they can often include some very valuable clues about the dates, the events related to those photos that just by looking at the photos or the prints, I may not be able to figure out. So we may toss those things later. I understand the goal. Maybe after you've organized them and put the originals into archival storage. But for now, let's go ahead and keep those envelopes and clues and receipts. And then one other common mistake, I'm pretty opinionated about this, feel free to disagree with me, but our strong recommendation is to organize photos by date. I mentioned that earlier. Don't organize them by person, place, or subject. Now, this happens a lot, especially with an estate situation. Maybe mom and dad have passed, or maybe they're moving and they're simplifying their life. And with the dearest of intentions, people will separate photos by person. That's the most common route we see people attempt. There's two problems with that, at least. One is most photos don't only have one person in them, right? So if, you know, Laura and Stephanie are both in the photo, which pile do they go in? Do I need to make a copy? Well, that's kind of the opposite of what we're trying to do. We're trying to simplify things, but organizing by person actually makes the photo organizing more complicated. The other thing about organizing by person is that the reality is most people don't want to see photos of themselves. Most of us find them a little unflattering, and we'd rather see photos of other people, or at least us with other people that we love. And so again, while it's the best of intentions to organize family photos by person, I don't think it's the best option. Instead of organizing by person, place, or subject, we would strongly recommend organize by date. And I will give you a sense of relief. It does not have to be perfect, right? Sometimes we can just look at a photo and either by its size or imprints or different physical attributes or the contents of the photo, we can say, you know what, that's from the 80s, that's from the 40s, that's from, whatever it is. And if that's all you can get, that's fine, right? If somebody comes along later and says, oh, I know more specifically, you can always be more specific. But it's very common from cars to clothes to hairstyles. At a bare minimum, we can normally get to the decade. And if I can get more specific than that, great. It doesn't have to be perfect, but organizing by date always works. It never needs explained to somebody. Everybody understands time. And the other great thing about organizing by date is that these projects always have surprises in them. People come to us, clients come to us, and they say, here's everything. And then they come back a week later, a little sheepishly, and they say, oh, guess what? I found more. And I'm like, of course you did. Everybody finds more. There's always more of this stuff. So when we organize by date and we get a new batch of photos, we can date those photos and slip them into the system. And it's not disruptive. It's not annoying. It doesn't cause us any trouble. But if you've got some other more complicated system, it's just a lot more decisions. So those are some of the reasons that we, to the very best of our ability, organize by date. And some people ask us, well, how in the world do you do that? Like you didn't, if you're working for a client, you didn't take the photos, you don't know the people, you weren't there. And yet we're incredibly effective at it. We're good detectives. We do this every day, all year. And it's just really, really fun work. So it's a fun process. Okay, so those are a couple of common mistakes that I would encourage you to avoid in the gathering phase. So that's just a brief overview of gathering physical photos. Get them in one place, take over the dining table, whatever it is, get them in one place. Then on the digital side, if you came to this looking for digital photo help, you're going to do the same thing, but you're going to get different things. You're going to gather different things. You're going to get computers and phones, maybe tablets. You're going to get old hard drives and backup hard drives. You're going to get thumb drives. You're going to get CDs and DVDs. These are not a great way to store your files, but in the early 2000s, lots of us did it. So you're going to get those CDs and DVDs. You're going to look for memory cards, including the ones in the drawer, in the computer, including the ones still in the camera from your last trip. You don't want to miss them at all. And you may also have content in cloud storage and photo organizing apps like Apple Photos, Google Photos, Amazon Photos. You may also use file syncing services like Dropbox or OneDrive. And the goal is, just like you would want to gather all your physical photos, you also want to gather all your digital photos, and we would just recommend putting these on a hard drive. And you are not organizing them at this point, you're not deduplicating them, and you're not reminiscing. I point that out because if you get lost in the memories, you won't finish this project. You kind of have to be cold-hearted here a little bit. You have to just kind of put your head down and literally just copy the files, knowing that you're deleting or you're copying bad files, you're copying duplicates, maybe 5 times duplicates. It's okay. You can sort those out later in the organizing phase, but for now, it's just really, really helpful to get them in one place because you can't organize or deduplicate or curate when they're in 14 different places. And I say 14, that's not an exaggeration. Sometimes we have people bring us 14 hard drives, plus their clouds, plus their phones, plus their, on and on and on. So once you get them in one place, then you can do that next phase. But this is why I say that this 5-step workflow is so essential to do in order, because if you don't do the gathering up front, for example, and you try to deduplicate over and over and over and over again, it's going to be incredibly inefficient and you'll probably run out of steam. A note about gathering, almost every family photo project will fit on a 1 terabyte hard drive. So you can get one of those for about 50 or 60 US dollars. And if you know you have a lot more than that, well, you can get a bigger hard drive, right? But almost every project we can gather on a 1 terabyte hard drive. It's not a big expense. And the process we use for this is very simple. We connect the hard drive, we make a folder, and we copy stuff to it. And you can see here just examples: Compact Flash 1, Compact Flash 2, Dropbox, DVD 1, DVD 2, SD cards, thumb drives, different computers, and so on. I just make a folder and I attach that device, that CD, that DVD, that thumb drive, whatever it is, and I copy over all of the digital photos and digital movies and stuff to that folder. And I'm going to sort this out later, but this is just this brute force gathering process that finally gets it all in one place, and frankly could be effectively the first digital backup you've had, right? Just getting it in one place. So we gather all of this. And then the third category, I know the session was about decluttering your photo life, but it's hard to separate the photos from the movie. So I just want to point out briefly a couple of the key home movie formats you're looking for. We think about these in three main categories. Number one is your film reels. So Kodak introduced 16 millimeter film in 1923. And you may have 16 millimeter film, regular 8, Super 8 film from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever it is. Basically, you're looking for round reels. If you hold it up to light, you'll see a sequence of little pictures. If it's completely opaque, that's probably an audio reel. It can kind of be confused if you're not familiar with the difference. But if it's a film reel, you can hold it up to the light, you can see tiny little pictures, and that is one of these film reel formats, kind of 1920s to 1980s. Then we jump forward to the 1980s to 2000s. We had a whole bunch of video cassette formats. At Chaos to Memories, we actually convert more than 30 formats of video, all sorts of popular and rare videotapes, film reels. We do all of this in-house, but you're generally looking at some kind of a rectangle, right? There were little ones, there were big ones, there were really big ones, there were medium ones, there were analog ones, there's digital, on and on and on. If it's rectangular, it's a videotape, probably 80s to 2000s. That's another big bucket that you're going to want to gather. And then what's funny is we kind of go back to the round format. They're not film reels, but by the early 2000s, lots of us were recording footage like on a mini DV camera and either copying those files to a DVD, or with apps like iMovie and iDVD from Apple, we're making like our own home DVDs. We've got some curated memories on those discs. So when it comes to home movies, I would just make three big piles. Maybe they're literally buckets or boxes, put those in, sort it out. And here's why you want to do all this gathering up front. One is it's the most efficient way to tackle this big, overwhelming project. And two is it helps you understand the scope of the project. And this is true if you're at an archive or a museum, or whether you're at home at the kitchen table. People feel overwhelmed by this project, and it's partly because they can't wrap their arms around it, and they can't put their eyes on it. So when you can see it, you can see how much you have, you can start estimating, then you can also start prioritizing. If you really have a lot of material, you'll realize, I can't do all of this at once. So what's most important? Maybe it's the oldest. Maybe it's just what's most important to you personally. There's no really right answer. There's lots of ways to answer that. I don't think there's a right answer to that. But once you see it all, finding what is most important to you can be the motivation to get going, take it in phases, and start tackling the project and kind of let the process unfold. So that's how we gather this stuff, kind of the main categories of physical, digital, and home movies. I'm going to keep going, and I will say, I see that there's chat and probably questions in the chat pod. I know Gretchen is going to do her best on my staff to answer those questions. I know that we won't be able to get to every question for the sake of time, but I've got kind of a fun announcement at the end. We're going to have some office hours next week for follow-up if we don't get to answer all your questions. So I'm going to keep presenting for now. We'll get through as much of this as we can, and then if we have a little time at the end, I'll do my best to answer unanswered questions. So phase one is gather. I hope you get a sense of why that's important to start with. Phase two is preserve. And in most cases, this is dealing with either converting some kind of home movie or scanning photos. And so I actually teach whole courses just on digitization best practices. We do so much of it here at the studio, but let me give you just a couple of top line recommendations, whether you do the scanning and conversion yourself, or whether you hire an expert that you trust to do this work for you. Let me tell you what I think your goals should be, what you're after, and what you're asking for. So first question, like the number one question everybody asks us is, what's the ideal resolution? What should I scan? What's the DPI or the PPI? What resolution should I scan at? Broadly speaking, we recommend scanning prints So photo prints, physical photo prints at 600 PPI, and slides and negatives generally at 4,000 PPI. And we're not just making this up. This isn't just like my capricious recommendation. These are actually aligned with something called FAGI. So these are federal guidelines for cultural heritage preservation. I feel like if it's good enough, you know, kind of in the museum archive, national history level, then it's good for all of us. And here it is in a nutshell. If you scan lower resolution than this, you are leaving some detail on the table. And if you scan higher than this, you are most likely wasting your time. So you can scan prints higher than 600 PPI. It will probably take longer. It will give you a bigger file that takes longer to edit and longer to back up. But there are physical limitations to these physical items. And in your attempt to scan higher than 600 PPI, you probably won't get any actual more detail, right? The other benefit of scanning high instead of lower than this, you may say, well, 300 PPI is fine, right? That will allow you to reprint an original at its exact size, that it's an original size. So if I scan a 4x6 print at 300 PPI, that gets me a 4x6 print on reproduction. But if I'm scanning at the recommended 600 PPI, that effectively means I can reproduce that original at twice the original size. And if I stretch it a little bit more, I might even get away with 2.5 to 3 times larger. So it's very helpful to scan at kind of these ideal resolutions. You can get the most out of it without wasting your time and giving you the just the maximum flexibility in terms of restoration, retouching, reproduction, and sharing and publishing, whatever you want to do with them. So those are our ideal resolutions. The other thing that I want to point out is a quality comparison. This was just from a recent project that I was working on, I think just last week. And we had a set of negatives and prints together. And the negatives, I'm sorry, the prints, as you can see on the left, were pretty rough. The dyes had faded, and which is common in some kinds of film and processing. It had really faded. And then, to my delight, I found the negatives in the envelope. So I did a side-by-side comparison, and just so you know, there's no manipulation here. There's no Photoshop, there's no trickery, there's no correction. This is straight out of, it's just a straight scan. On the left is the print, on the right is the scan of the negative of the same image. And at least 3 things jump out to me. One is the resolution is much higher. I made these different sizes to try to illustrate that, but effectively the resolution that I could get out of the negative, even though it's smaller, was like twice what I could get out of the print. I could just get so much more detail. The other thing is if you look around the edges of the print, there's actually a fair bit cropped off. There's probably 10 to 15% cropped off. In this case, it doesn't matter that much, but I'm definitely getting more image area from the negative. And in some cases, literally, there will be a whole nother person in the photo that you never saw in the print because the print lab was just being so fast and efficient that they have their tolerances pretty loose. And so they crop a lot and you don't always see your whole image. And then obviously, the color is outstanding. The negative has aged better. It hasn't been handled. It hasn't faded. It looks so much better. And again, if all you have is the print, then that's what we would scan, and we'll preserve that memory as well as we can. But if you've got the negative, I think this is just a helpful comparison of why it matters and why it's maybe worth doing a little bit more work. Let's see. There's probably a slew of questions there. If we have time, I'll come back and there's always questions about DPI and PPI and scanning and negative, so I'll try to come back to that. So let's keep going. Phase 3. So preservation, those are the number 1 questions we get there around resolution and what should I scan. The third phase is organization. Again, this could be a 10-hour course. We're going to just kind of fly by, hit the highlights. So the first thing I'm going to tell you in terms of organization is do your best to delete the duds and duplicates up front, whether that is deleting digital duplicates of digital photos, or whether it's tossing duds from prints or like double prints, you know, that you got from the photo lab and whatnot. You don't need to scan everything, and you don't even need to keep everything. That can be a hard thing to decide. That can feel pressure. People feel like they're stewards of these items, and that is important. At the same time, if you don't know about it, especially with family photos, if you don't know who it is, you don't care about it, maybe your dad had a real love of, flowers and he took a lot of them and you just don't care. Or another example we see, a lot of people took a lot of photos at the zoo. And I have some fun photos at the zoo, but you know what? Like giraffes kind of look the same. So maybe you don't have to scan those, right? Maybe you can skip those in the process. The fastest thing to organize is the thing you don't keep, right? So delete duds and dupes and then focus on what matters. So the way we organize digital photos and scanned photos is the same. First of all, we put them in folders by date. This is just a sample screenshot. And this goes back to that sorting by date that I talked about that we find so effective. Don't have to be perfect at it. We're doing our best estimates. We put them in folders by dates, and then there's subfolders under these. The next thing that we do is, and this is really important, this is probably the most important thing, is we use something called metadata. So some of you are very familiar with this. Some of you think I just said a foreign word, very unfamiliar. Metadata is kind of like when your grandma used to write notes on the back of photos, or somebody would write a caption or a little note on the edge of a slide. Metadata is the digital version of that. The difference is we don't see it physically, but it's inside the file. So in this example of a vacation photograph that I took, the location is the Golden Gate Bridge, which is in San Francisco. You even see the GPS coordinates of exactly where I was when we took that. Some keywords include California, Golden Gate Bridge, vacation, and then there's a little caption as we were going on this walk as a family. So the value of metadata is really twofold. One is it helps me preserve stories that are just too long for a file name. And then all of this information, which I don't see on the photo, but it's in the photo, is also searchable. And that's really key because our average client comes to us with about 10,000 physical photos to scan and over 100,000 digital photos to organize. With that much stuff, it's overwhelming. And you don't want to browse through tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of photos. You want to be able to search and find all those California vacation photos just in an instant. So we use metadata to do that. And then the files have to have some kind of a name. And I don't think IMG0597 is a good one, the kind of stuff we get off our cameras and scanners. So we use a very simple, consistent file name scheme, which is year, month, date, which is an ISO standard for dates. Then we have a unique short subject and then a unique sequence number. And the beauty of this very simple file name scheme is that software does it very, very quickly, almost completely automatic for us. And it makes every file in an archive three things. It makes it sort chronologically. With the subject area, it makes it self-explanatory. And with the sequence number, it makes it unique. So even in a catalog of hundreds of thousands or millions of files that we've done, no two files are named the same. Everything's unique. And again, speaking to the archivists in the room, kind of on the professional side, you may have some other more complicated naming schemes. Specifically, a lot of you guys will put like record groups up in the front. Totally understand that situation, but this is how we tackle it for family photo archives. Pretty simple. So files have to go in folders. There's no reason for thousands and thousands of files to just be dumped into one directory. So we use subfolders. Metadata is really where it's at to keep things organized and searchable, retain those stories. And then we use batch automation to name the files again, chronologically, self-explanatory, and unique. So that's the essence of kind of a high level of the organizing system we use. And we do all of this with Adobe Lightroom Classic. Some of you guys who know me know that I worked at Adobe for a long time. I worked at Adobe for more than 22 years, worked on the Creative Cloud team and worked with the Lightroom and Photoshop teams. And I no longer work at Adobe, but I'm still an Adobe customer gladly. And I'll tell you why we use Adobe Lightroom Classic. It's not because I work there, but because Lightroom Classic will work with scanned photos as well as digital photos. And it'll work with cameras like point and shoot cameras and good professional cameras and even my phone. It'll work with virtually any kind of digital video or still format, JPEGs, TIFFs, RAW files, DNGs, videos, and so on. And it's also available on Mac or Windows. So it doesn't matter what you're shooting with, what formats you're dealing with, what kind of computer you have. This is a very powerful, fast application available from a reputable software company, supports Mac and Windows, supports 100% of the metadata standards that I've referred to, which come from IPTC. And it's a very fast, capable application. I've worked with catalogs in the millions of photos. I'm working on a project right now. I think it's got about 400,000 files in it. And it just runs fantastically. So this is what we use and every day. The nice thing is because everything that we're doing is based on industry standards for metadata, just because we build an archive with Lightroom Classic doesn't mean it needs to stay there. Any platform, any cloud, any device that supports metadata can handle everything that we do, but this is the core tool that we use to build and manage archives for our clients. So a little blurb about Lightroom, and jumping ahead, where time is flying, let me just hit on the last two phases of this 5-phase workflow. So after you gather, preserve, organize using the system we just talked about, the last two things are share, which is kind of the fun part, and then maintain. So I'm just going to mention briefly our 3 favorite ways to share photos and things that we do a lot for our clients. In the top left corner, you see a photo book sample. This is just a family project that I did with our family photos, and we do these for clients. We do vacations, we do graduations, we do weddings, we do wedding albums, we do all sorts of stuff. We do retirements and so on. And some people will come to us and say, hey, make me a photo album, make me a photo book. We want to do that, but we really, really strongly recommend let's do the organizing first, because you will end up with a better book, faster and cheaper, because all of your photos are sorted chronologically and they're searchable. You can find the people, the events, the years, the milestone memories that matter. And so this book is actually a 100-page book. It has, I think, something like 300 to 500 photos in it. And I did the whole thing in 2 hours. So I spent 1 hour pulling photos. This was a graduation album for our oldest son. I pulled a couple hundred photos from the archive, all chronological, all of Andrew. That took about an hour to find those couple hundred favorites. And then I designed the entire book in an hour. We're very fast at this. I designed this book in an hour and the project was done. So most people couldn't even find their photos, much less do the whole thing. So this is an example where doing things in order, doing the gather and all the organization up front makes the sharing easier. 2 other ways to share that we love are in the bottom left corner, mounted prints. These can be, as you see here, like put on a picture ledge and displayed easily without framing or complication or holes in the wall or anything like that. Very simple and flexible. It's easy to update and so on, but they're also thin enough that they're easy to put in a photo frame. They're only about 1/8 of an inch mounted on styrene. So you could always frame them if you want. They're freestanding as well. And then again, really popular with families and family photos is canvas wraps. So we do canvas gallery wraps. They're beautiful, modern, timeless. We've got a bunch of these of some of our favorite family photos in our home. We've got some samples here in the studio and really enjoy those. And you can do non-tangible things. I love tangible because we do so much digital stuff that it's awesome to get it back into your home, in your hands, on the wall. I think most people really love that. But with a searchable family archive, you can also put it in slideshows. You can post it on Facebook. You can put it on Instagram. You can text it to your brother. We actually just had a client in here today with a large extended family, and we scanned about 1,500 photos for him and did a bunch of old film reels from like the 40s and 50s. So we just delivered all of those on his iPad today, and he is ready with the share button. Like Dan is just ready to go, sharing those old family memories. He was super excited. So there's lots of ways to share. And then the last phase of this is maintain. Because here's the tricky thing about photos is as long as you're alive, you're probably going to keep taking photos. So this project's never done, right? You can catch up, but then you keep taking photos. So the nice thing is if you do these 4 other phases, then you're going to build some new habits. You're probably going to start shooting differently. Once you've curated and deleted a bunch of bad photos, you're going to be like, hey, I got to start shooting a little bit better, a little bit more thoughtfully. It influences how you shoot. And then you're going to use those habits that you use through like the organization phase to then maintain your archive. And it's way easier to maintain like a month or even a year than it is to catch up on decades or generations. So the maintenance is way easier. And the essence of it is really the same process over and over. Gather it. Preservation really isn't there's normally not too much there in terms of modern digital. Maybe you get some file formats to convert, but normally you're just gathering them. You're going to organize them, which again means deleting the duds, tagging with metadata, the good stuff, and then keeping that organized chronologically. And then a few tips related to maintenance that people ask about all the time. Again, we do everything right here in Lightroom. You just keep adding to the catalog, and Lightroom's very robust. It can handle very, very large collections. And when you've got all this stuff in one place and you've done all this work, I would really recommend as a part of your maintenance routine, keeping this backed up. So many of you have heard the 3-2-1 method from my friend Peter Krogh. Basically, you want 3 copies, 2 different media, 1 off-site. So you'd want like a primary drive. You'd want a backup. Doing all of this work and having it in one place is terrifying. I don't want anybody to do that. And my recommendation is you can never buy 1 hard drive. You always have to buy 3, because you're going to have a primary working drive, you're going to have a backup, and then your second backup is going to be offsite. So in the case of real disaster, a fire, a flood, a hurricane, or tornado, whatever it is, either a backup offsite hard drive or maybe a cloud service like Backblaze or something like that that's keeping things offsite. And I don't want to be alarmist about this, but I do want to be realistic. Today, we are returning a project to a family in the Caribbean that 7 years ago, their home was destroyed in Hurricane Maria. And I mean destroyed. It was gone. And so massive, massive damage, tons of loss, tons of photo memories lost. I was just this summer able to finally retrieve what was left of their photos, and we scanned and preserved them as best as we could. And I'm ready to ship them back to them. And yet, ironically, they are going through another tropical storm, probably a hurricane at the moment. So I'm sending them texts and they're not responding because of the storm. And so these things happen, right? And unfortunately, clients find us after they happen, and an offsite backup. All that to say that an offsite backup is your best bet in a real bad situation to keep this stuff safe. You can have multiple backups. You can only have 1 copy of a unique photo. So we want to keep them as safe as possible, but backups are a key part of that strategy. So keep them safe. And that is the 5-step workflow. So gather, preserve, organize, share, maintain. Let me mention just a few things, and then we'll wrap up with some Q&A, just a few resources. So I didn't put links on here on the slides because they're a little bit long and they can be a little frustrating. But if you visit Rocky Nook, just like it sounds, rockynook.com, they're the publisher of my book, Declutter Your Photo Life. They're fantastic. They publish great books and have been a great partner. If you use the discount code you see there on the screen, Declutter40, you will actually save 40% off the book. I think it's the best deal you can get out there. You can buy the ebook, the paper book, or both in a nice bundle. So if you want to, like 200 pages of detail on this 5-step overview that I just walked us through, you can check that out. I also actually did a 5-part, 10-hour series with Rocky Nook that is, again, like 5 2-hour segments on each one of those phases in a lot more detail. So that is recent and available online. I noticed some of the folks in the session already attended that live, but you can purchase the recordings as a 10-hour bundle, or you can just buy one of the sessions if you're interested in that. That's also on the Rocky Nook website. And then we also have a ton of courses on our website as well as at Chaos to Memories. So if you want to learn more about what we do and how we do it, we're not secretive, we're not protective. We love to share and teach. And so everything we do, we've got 10 courses online. This is the newest one. Literally, it just released today about estimating large photo organizing projects. So that's available today on Chaos to Memories, our website. And I realize I'm not putting links on all of these pages, but we will send you a follow-up email tomorrow, not only with a link to the recording, if you couldn't stay the whole time or you just wanted to you loved it so much, you want to see it again, you can check out the recording, and we'll include links to all of these resources and discount codes. And then the last thing is we dabble with Instagram. We have an amazing staff here. We love the work. We love the studio we work in. We love our clients. We just have a blast. We really enjoy the work. And so we share, privately, anonymously, just projects we're working on, fun things we're up to, things we're trying. That link, that QR code, if you've got a phone available, is a direct link to our Instagram account. And so you can see what we're up to and follow us there if you're interested. So with that, I'll leave that up for one more moment. I'm going to take a look at the chat pod. And let's see what questions we've got. We've got about 8 minutes left. So let's see. Okay, I'm going to stop my screen share. And so many questions in the chat pod. So some of you just giving shout outs. Thank you for that. So Alan, so I see Gretchen maybe already answered this, but I'll just mention it. Alan asked about online sharing with friends and family. So there's tons of services out there. I'll just mention that we use SmugMug. It's not our service. It's an off-the-shelf photo sharing service. It's been around for decades, literally. And the reasons we like it are it is a very affordable service. I think it's about $100 a year for unlimited storage, which is a lot of storage. It also supports the searchable metadata that we were talking about. So you can find your memories like on your phone, on your browser, on your TV, wherever you want to access the SmugMug service. And it is also available on lots of different devices. Like it's not Mac or Windows or iOS or Android. It's very, very flexible. So we really like that SmugMug for those reasons. Let's see. So Mel Mel Grant's asking, what's your thoughts about having your offsite backup in cloud storage somewhere? I use lots of cloud stuff. We use Backblaze. I'm not opposed to it, but I will say we actually use both, partly as a business, because even if I have, I don't know, 40 terabytes on Backblaze or something, lots and lots of storage. I can get that back, not quickly, right? Like as a business, I need to be like, if something catastrophic happened, I would need to be up and running like tomorrow morning. And so by having local offsite backups and cloud backups, it's kind of a belt and suspenders thing. So I have a safe offsite backup, but I also have readily accessible, and I could be back up and running, in an hour. So good questions. Let's see. Yeah, so Jenny asks, is there a photo software you would recommend that isn't a monthly subscription? So honestly, there's not. So a couple things come to mind that will maybe surprise and upset some people. Most of your free to cheap software, photo organizing software, so I would put Apple Photos, Google Photos, Amazon Photos, I put them in that category. The problem with those free or cheap solutions is that they don't support metadata standards like we talked about, and they're really like a lock-in strategy. So for example, Google Photos, they'll automatically tag your friends and your events and all of that stuff. And if you decide to take your photos elsewhere and use a different kind of phone or device or platform or whatever, all of that metadata stays in their system. Unless only if you're really techie, like really technical, and know these weird little apps and technical workarounds, how to get that metadata out, it's all stuck in their system. It's a lock-in strategy, and I feel like they're holding your memories and your stories hostage, and I think it's terrible. That's why we don't use or recommend those. We're committed to standards, because in a nutshell, when we work for a client, like we're working for them, we're serving them, but we're also thinking of their kids, their grandkids, and their great-grandkids. And the reason we have that long view is because we're in the middle of it. Because we have people coming to us with old photos that are 50 or 100 or 140 years old saying, I want to restore this. I want to know the details of this. I want to know the story. I wish I knew who that was. Here's the crazy thing is we can do that. We can do that now for the future generation, but we can only do it if we're using these standards. It's the best chance we have for future longevity and safety of not only your photos, but also your stories. And so that's why we're committed to these standards, and that's why we use the software. For us, just so you know, Adobe sells something called the photography plan. It's Photoshop, full version of Photoshop and Lightroom Classic for only $10 a month, which frankly is like less than a roll of film these days. So that's what we use and why we recommend it. All righty. So Sarah, I see Sarah's question. We'll just wrap up with one or two more questions here. Sarah, I see your question about Dropbox. So here's the question, or here's the issue with Dropbox. We really suggest people use a dedicated photo sharing service. Dropbox is primarily for your work documents, right? It's okay for PDFs and Excel spreadsheets and some Word documents and things like that. I know people put photos in there, but you've got two problems. One is with Dropbox, the ability to search is pretty weak. When you have thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of photos, again, your ability to search that content is really important because it's just overwhelming. And to think about doing that like in a web browser with bad search, it's terrible. So that's why we would not be excited about that. And then the other thing with Dropbox is, and this is confusing for people, not everybody understands it, it is a sync service, not a backup. So what I mean by that is, if I'm syncing files with Dropbox and I delete a file on my computer, it's going to delete it from Dropbox. It's just a sync. It's keeping everything up to date, for better or for worse. So it's not really protecting me against my mistakes. Whereas a true backup service, if I do something stupid or have a technical failure, I can go recover my backup. So it sounds just like a Word, but they do work differently. So that's why we're really dedicated to true photo services. Yeah. Yes, great questions. Let's see. Anything else I can answer briefly? Great stuff. So Jay Phelps. Jay, I'm not sure what your first name is, but you have a great question. You said, you asked, how do I choose to keep only a portion of certain photos? Like I have 20 plus images of a fun day at the park with my dog or family. How do I narrow down that number? I know I don't need all 20. So in a nutshell, this will be the last question I answer before we run out of time. It's actually my favorite chapter in the whole book, in the Declutter Your Photo Life book. We do this for clients all the time, partly because most of us have lifelong photo backgrounds. Also because we're a little emotionally detached. Like, we love you, but not your photos in the same way that we love our photos, right? We're a little detached. We can be a little neutral and we can say, hey, like, this is a better photo. More objectively, this is a better photo. Like, their eyes are open, they're looking, they're, whatever it is. And so we do that for clients all the time. And one of the things that I talk about in the book, it's really my favorite chapter about curation, is look for emotion, like look for connection, look for relationship, look for eye contact, all of those kinds of things. Here's the reality. There's a guy named Jimmy Chin, and I don't know if you know who Jimmy is. I've not met him personally, but I know a lot about him and I know his work. He's one of the best adventure photographers in the world. He can like climb a mountain and shoot a movie all at the same time. It's incredible. So the interesting thing about Jimmy is that even though he's one of the best photographers in the world, when he comes back to the studio to edit his photos, the first thing he does is he deletes about half of them. So if Jimmy, one of the best photographers in the world, deletes half of his photos, then why do I think I should keep all of mine, right? So it's just a helpful reminder. I do talk about it in detail in the book about our strategies, some tips. I think that will be helpful. So last thing, Jen, you're saying, where do I get the book? We will send a follow-up. The title of the book is Declutter Your Photo Life, the same as this session. You can find it on Rocky Nook, Amazon, wherever you buy books. We will include that link, some reminders, some resources, as well as a link to this recording tomorrow. We'll get that out in email. And then the last thing I'm going to mention is that I know there are lots of questions we didn't get to. So, and we kind of anticipated that. So I'm excited that I'm going to put this in the chat pod. I have to go copy it. Next Tuesday, same time, same same scene. I'm just going to offer an office hour session. So it's going to be 7 to 8 p.m. US Central Time. And there's no presentation, there's no agenda. It's just open Q&A. So if you guys are interested in maybe following up and getting more details about some of the things we covered tonight, we'll be there. We'll include that link in the follow-up email as well. You can sign up now at that reg link that I just put in there. If you'd like to join us next week, we'd love to have you. So with that, it's 8:01, ended on time. Thank you guys so much for being here. If there's anything we can help with, whether it's related to the book or training, or whether it is, there's projects that you need help with, we would love to hear from you. You can visit Chaos to Memories and check us out. Gretchen, thanks for being here to help with so many questions. And to all of you, have a great night or day wherever you are in the world. And hopefully we'll see some of you again next week. Cheers.